On Christmas morning, my younger brother unwrapped a brand new Ferrari sitting in the garage with a giant red bow wrapped across the hood, while I unwrapped a pair of $2 socks with the clearance tag still attached. My mother laughed, not kindly, but with a sharp, satisfied smirk, and said, "Be humble. Everyone gets what they deserve." My brother revved his new engine. I held the socks. And in that exact moment, something inside me finally broke. At 1 a.m. that night, while the entire house slept under glowing Christmas lights, I packed a suitcase, placed a very specific Christmas present under their tree, and vanished without saying a single goodbye. The next morning, when my mother opened that gift, she screamed so loudly the neighbors heard. I didn't go back to see it. I didn't need to. I already knew what that scream meant. My name is Jade. I'm 30 years old. And for years, I was the responsible daughter. The one who always sacrificed, always worked, always gave. At 27, I became a senior financial analyst at a major investment firm, earning more money than anyone in my family ever expected. My parents proudly called me their success story, the one who would carry the family forward. They clapped the loudest at my accomplishments, praised my discipline, and bragged about me to anyone who would listen. But their pride wasn't love. It was foreshadowing. Not long after I got that dream job, my parents' lakeside event venue began collapsing financially. They approached me with voices trembling just enough to be convincing. They were 3 months behind on payments, they said. It was temporary. They promised just until the venue recovers. I believed them. I agreed immediately. I thought I was doing the right thing for family, for loyalty, for love. I didn't realize then that temporary would stretch into 3 silent years, or that my generosity would eventually buy my brother a Ferrari while I lived like a broke student. But that truth would reveal itself piece by piece, building toward the Christmas morning that ended everything. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. My parents described their financial situation gently at first, almost poetically, as if wording could soften math. The lakeside event venue had suffered after the pandemic. Bookings had dropped and clients postponed weddings indefinitely. They said they were embarrassed to ask and that it would be just 3 or 4 months of support. They emphasized that I was the one who understood money, which was their soft way of saying, "You make the most, so you should fix this for us." I agreed without hesitation, not because I was obligated, but because I loved them and believed in them. I set up the transfers that night, one into the house mortgage account, one into the venue loan. More than most people's rent combined, quietly withdrawn from my paycheck every month. It felt heavy, but temporary, except temporary quietly became routine, and routine became expectation. The first month they thanked me 3 times. The second month only once. By the 4th month, silence. No updates, no signs of improvement. Just an unspoken understanding that the help was now a standard part of their financial plan. Meanwhile, the venue began posting more photos online, new decor, upgraded lighting, refurbished bridal rooms, a redesigned entry arch. They called these essential improvements to attract clients again. And that word essential became their shield. Everything suddenly became essential. New furniture, new paint, new landscaping outside the venue. My mother claimed it was marketing. My father said it was brand image. And I told myself not to question it because I didn't want to see the truth. My money wasn't saving them from collapse. It was enabling them to pretend nothing had changed. Ryan, meanwhile, lived like the world had handed him a VIP pass. He dabbled in photography for a month, then music production, then streaming, then social media content creation. Every new hobby came with new equipment, cameras, microphones, light panels, editing software, none of which he bought himself. He dressed exclusively in limited edition sneakers, oversized streetwear, designer beanies. My parents praised him as creative and said he was on the verge of something big. I was on the verge, too. On the verge of realizing I was funding everyone's lifestyle except my own. My life shrank in quiet, invisible ways. I stopped replacing things when they broke. I skipped trips that coworkers invited me on. I ate cheaply. I postponed necessary repairs on my car. I limited myself so they wouldn't have to. And yet, they spoke about money as if it were happening around them, not because of me. My mother occasionally sighed about how times are tough while holding a new piece of jewelry she got on sale. My father talked about how the venue just needed one big season while planning landscaping expansions. The emotional weight wasn't in what they said, but in what they didn't. Not once did they mention when they planned to resume paying their own bills. There was one moment, almost forgettable, that changed everything for me. My parents were hosting a small engagement party at the venue and asked me to come early. I walked in on them discussing plans for a future renovation project, a glass pavilion extension overlooking the lake. They talked about costs, contractors, timelines. Their voices were hopeful, excited, almost youthful. Then my father said, "We'll figure it out. Jade always manages things." They both nodded as if this were natural, obvious, expected. That sentence wedged itself into my mind like a splinter. I always manage things. Not because I wanted to, because they assumed I would. Still, I didn't break. I kept paying month after month after month until the total reached a number that no longer felt real. $514,400. I remember sitting in my apartment one night, staring at my spreadsheet, realizing I had paid more into their lives than into my own. The number was big enough to buy a luxury car, a down payment on a new home, or 2 years of travel. Instead, it had become a ghost. Money that vanished each month without acknowledgement. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the entitlement that grew in its shadow. When someone sacrifices out of love and the recipient stops seeing the sacrifice, it becomes servitude. I began to feel not like a daughter, but an invisible machine pumping financial oxygen into a house that was never mine. As the third Christmas approached, the emotional distance between us grew. My parents spoke to me like a helpful assistant rather than a child. Ryan treated me like a background character in his life. And I, exhausted, overstretched, and slowly eroding, kept telling myself it would get better. But families built on uneven foundations don't magically balance themselves. They crack, they tilt, they collapse under their own weight. I didn't know it yet, but mine was already collapsing. It just needed one final unforgettable moment to bring the whole structure down. Christmas would become that moment. By the time Christmas arrived, something in the house felt different, subtly theatrical, like my family was performing the role of happy and prosperous, even though I was the one quietly paying the bills that kept the stage lights on. When I drove up the driveway on Christmas Eve, the house looked like a magazine spread. New exterior lights cast warm gold highlights across the snow. A full LED nativity scene glowed in the yard, accompanied by a professionally decorated wreath on the door. Inside, an enormous 12-foot tree dominated the living room. Its ornaments perfectly coordinated in red, gold, and white. It wasn't the decor of a struggling family. It was the decor of people who believed the struggle belonged to someone else. Me. My mother greeted me wearing a new velvet dress and diamond earrings I had never seen before. My father poured himself aged whiskey he absolutely should not have been able to afford. And Ryan, well, Ryan floated around the house like a royal heir awaiting coronation. Snorts. He dropped hints all night about the big surprise he expected in the morning. My parents smiled every time he spoke, their pride swelling like a balloon. I quietly placed my modestly wrapped gifts beneath the mountain of expensive ones and reminded myself that gratitude was optional in this house, but expectations were not. I slept poorly in my old bedroom. The walls felt smaller than I remembered, as if the house itself was trying to warn me that I didn't belong anymore. I tossed and turned, replaying the past 3 years in my mind. The transfers, the sacrifices, the red flags I ignored. Something inside me twisted tighter with each memory, but I pushed it down. Christmas was supposed to be peaceful. I forced myself to pretend. Morning arrived with forced cheer. My mother insisted we gather around the tree like we used to, but the moment felt hollow. Staged for appearances. Ryan tore into his first pile of gifts, designer clothes, headphones, limited edition sneakers, a drone he would probably never use for anything productive. Each item drew exaggerated reactions from him and proud nods from my parents. It was a scene I had witnessed many times before. But this year, something felt different, like the universe was giving me one final chance to see the truth. Then my father reached into his pocket and pulled out a key fob with a bright red Ferrari emblem. The room fell still for a moment before Ryan erupted like he had won a televised sweepstakes. He ran outside, shouting in disbelief, and we followed. There, parked in the garage, sat a new Ferrari, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Red, pristine, fresh off the lot. A giant bow stretched across the hood. The smell of new leather drifted into the crisp air. My brother circled it, laughing, filming every angle on his phone. My parents watched him with sentimental pride, as if gifting a luxury sports car was as natural as giving someone socks. I stood in silence, calculating the price range instinctively. Years of working in finance made it impossible not to. Even the most modest model was outside the realm of sanity for my parents' budget. Unless, of course, they had never been budgeting at all. Unless they had spent the past 3 years letting me cover the essentials so they could redirect their income toward extravagances. Unless the financial struggle I believed was real had merely been selective hardship. Hardship for me, luxury for them. We returned inside, and it was finally my turn. 3 small boxes sat near the back of the tree. Noticeably lighter, noticeably less considered. I opened the first. A cheap candle clearly from a clearance rack. The second, a flimsy photo frame with a scratch across the glass. And the third, my real gift, was a pair of socks, white, thin, folded sloppily, a bright red $2 clearance sticker, still attached like an insult. My mother didn't hide her smirk. She didn't even pretend to soften the moment. "Be humble," she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "Everyone gets what they deserve." Ryan laughed. My father chuckled, and I felt something sharp and final snap inside me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. A stillness so absolute that it frightened me more than anger ever could. In that moment, the past 3 years unfolded in perfect clarity. The renovations, the new jewelry, the venue upgrades, the expensive decorations, the equipment Ryan needed for each new hobby. They hadn't been struggling. They had simply reorganized their finances around my income. My parents' money went to lifestyle. My money paid for survival. My brother's entitlement was subsidized directly by my sacrifice. I wasn't a daughter in their eyes. I was a resource. I smiled politely and thanked them because politeness was my armor. But inside the decision was already forming, sharp and cold and absolute. Christmas morning wasn't the breaking point. It was the confirmation, the proof, the permission I needed to finally choose myself. And by the time Christmas dinner ended, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to leave in a way they would never forget. I didn't leave right away. I waited. I moved through the rest of Christmas Day with mechanical politeness, smiling at the appropriate moments, helping clean up dishes, watching my family celebrate themselves while pretending I didn't exist. My mother replayed videos of Ryan sitting in the Ferrari like a prince. My father bragged loudly to relatives about how hard they'd worked to afford such a gift. Ryan strutted around the house with the key fob dangling from his finger like a crown jewel. Not one of them looked at me long enough to see the decision forming behind my eyes. After dinner, I excused myself early and went to my old room. I closed the door quietly, sat on the bed, and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even tremble. I simply did math. Cold, logical, unforgiving math. I reviewed the past 3 years of transfers, every mortgage payment, every venue loan contribution, every emergency deposit disguised as just this once. 36 months, $514,400. The sum looked surreal on the screen. A number that could have changed my life had instead been funneled into theirs. I pulled out the folder where I kept my financial copies, statements stamped by the bank, monthly transfer confirmations, and most importantly, the refinanced property documents I signed 2 years earlier when my parents said they needed me on the paperwork to secure a better rate. Back then, I thought it was harmless. Now, I understood exactly what I held. Co-ownership, legal leverage, power. At 12:15 a.m., the house was silent. At 12:30, the lights dimmed. At 1 a.m., I began. That night, while they were all sleeping off their perfect Christmas, I did one final thing before walking out forever. I opened Instagram, took 2 photos, and posted a story that stayed up exactly 24 hours, long enough for every family, friend, neighbor, and follower to see it and screenshot it. First photo, the pair of $2 socks with the bright red clearance tag still stuck on them. Snorts. Second photo, a screenshot of one of my monthly transfers clearly labeled Mom and Dad Mortgage December 2024. And underneath I wrote word for word. 3 years, $514,400. Today I got socks. Today I stopped paying. Today I started selling the house. Merry Christmas from the family ATM. I hit post, turned off my phone, walked out the front door with my suitcase, got in my car, and disappeared. By the time the sun came up, that story had already been shared in every local group chat, every family group, every neighbor's phone. People were blowing up Ryan's comments. They were texting my parents. Some were even posting the screenshots themselves. And when my mother finally opened that black box under the tree and realized the house was already listed for forced sale, well, let's just say her scream became the most famous sound in the neighborhood that year. The next morning, I turned my phone on briefly. I didn't expect peace, and I didn't get it. The notifications flooded instantly. Missed calls, frantic texts, messages sent to group chats, even voicemails from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't listen to the voicemails, but the text previews told me everything. My mother had opened the envelope. She had screamed. She had screamed so loudly that neighbors called to ask if everything was okay. My father had demanded to know what this betrayal meant. Ryan accused me publicly of destroying Christmas. Extended family members chimed in with opinions they had formed within minutes of hearing the story, mostly from my parents' rewritten version, I'm sure. But the most revealing messages were the ones from my mother. They started with disbelief, shifted into denial, then spiraled rapidly into panic. She demanded explanations. She demanded gratitude for everything they'd done for me. She demanded I come home to fix the mess I made. She claimed they couldn't possibly repay me, that I was cruel, that I was ungrateful, that I was heartless. But not once did she mention the socks, the Ferrari, the years of silence while I paid their bills, the entitlement, the manipulation, the expectation that I would sacrifice endlessly while they lived comfortably. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then turned it off again, not out of anger, out of peace. They had finally seen the truth laid out in black and white, notarized and undeniable. And I was finally done carrying the burden they spent years pretending didn't exist. Christmas was over. So was my role in their lives. My absence wasn't a quiet one. Families built on entitlement don't crumble in silence. They erupt. I didn't witness the fallout firsthand, but the messages that leaked through friends, extended relatives, and mutual acquaintances painted a clearer picture than I ever expected. My envelope had detonated like a legal bomb in the middle of their living room. The screaming, the shock, the denial, all of it had been immediate and loud. But the consequences unfolded in slow, unmistakable waves. The first wave hit when the mortgage company received my official co-owner notification. Without my monthly payments, the account was immediately flagged. The venue loan followed. Within days, my parents had received 2 separate notices demanding updated financial responsibility information. They panicked. They had no plan because they never believed they would need one. For 3 straight years, they built a life on the assumption that my income would always cushion theirs. Take away the cushion and they fell fast. The second wave was the Ferrari. They had financed it, of course. My parents loved the illusion of wealth more than sustainability, and Ryan loved instant gratification even more. Once the collection notice arrived, the math finally hit him. His dream car required real money, money that neither he nor our parents had. The car payment alone was nearly the same amount I had been sending to support the venue. Without my contributions, the payments evaporated. The Ferrari lasted 28 days before it was repossessed in the middle of the night, witnessed by neighbors who filmed the entire spectacle. The videos circulated online. Ryan became a local punchline. The third wave was the venue. Bookings had slowed again, and half-finished renovations from the past year remained unpaid. Contractors demanded balances. Vendors requested settlement. My parents scrambled to cover everything but couldn't. In under 3 months, they defaulted. The venue closed its doors quietly. No announcement, no farewell post, no gratitude toward clients who kept them afloat for decades. Just a locked gate and a faded sign. All the years they spent pouring money into appearances ended exactly how illusions always end, empty and forgotten. The house was next. Without my payments, they fell behind quickly. They tried to negotiate. They tried to stall. They tried to borrow from extended family who were suddenly unable to help. Now that the truth about the Ferrari had made its rounds, eventually foreclosure began. They lost the house 6 months after that Christmas. The life they built on my sacrifice collapsed exactly as easily as they expected me to hold it up forever. During all this, did they reach out to apologize? No. They reached out to blame. The fragments that found their way back to me were always the same narrative. I abandoned them. I ruined Christmas. I caused the financial devastation. I was selfish. Never once did they mention the money I had given. Never once did they acknowledge the years they left me drowning quietly while they lived comfortably. In their version of the story, I stopped playing the role they wrote for me, and that itself was the crime. While their world collapsed, mine expanded. For the first time since landing my job, I had full control of my own paycheck. My first act was simple. I replaced my dying car with something reliable. Nothing extravagant, but fully mine. Then I upgraded my apartment into a high-rise unit overlooking the river. A space filled with light, silence, and room to breathe. I furnished it with quality pieces for the first time in my life. Choosing everything intentionally, not just because it was the cheapest option. My routines shifted, too. I bought groceries without checking my balance. I said yes to dinners. I traveled, not impulsively, but with purpose. A 2-week trip to Greece with coastal views that washed years of exhaustion from my bones. A weekend in New York for a financial conference that reignited my ambition. A spontaneous getaway to Vancouver with Ethan, who had watched me transform without trying to control or fix me. I didn't splurge irresponsibly. I simply lived the way someone with my income was supposed to live all along. Professionally, I thrived. Freed from the quiet financial panic that once sabotaged my focus, I took on major projects and delivered results fast. Leadership noticed. I received a promotion and a substantial bonus. Colleagues asked how I managed the sudden glow-up, unaware that the answer was simple. I had stopped being the unpaid foundation for someone else's life. Occasionally, gossip surfaced about my family. How they downsized into a small rental far outside town. How Ryan blamed everyone but himself for losing the car. How my mother cried to relatives about ungrateful children. How my father insisted they were starting over, even though he had never learned how to start from anything but denial. But I didn't respond. I didn't engage. I didn't correct their version of the story. Let them frame me as the villain if it made them feel better. Villains sleep well when they finally stop being exploited. Healing didn't require their apology. It required my distance. And the farther I moved from them, the clearer everything became. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't heartless. Clear's throat. I was free. In the months that followed their collapse, silence became the new language between us. Not peaceful silence, heavy, polluted silence. The kind that forms after every truth has been exposed, after every mask has fallen, after every lie has lost its power. My family never apologized. They never acknowledged the truth behind the $514,400. The years I spent struggling quietly so they could maintain comforts they never earned. The Ferrari they gifted to Ryan the same month they claimed they couldn't pay their own mortgage. They never once said we were wrong. Instead, they disappeared into the wreckage of their own choices. Still speaking, still blaming, but speaking to others, blaming others, never themselves. And for the first time in my life, their silence didn't hurt. It freed me. I heard things, of course. Small bits of information floated back to me like debris from a shipwreck. They moved twice in 6 months. First into a rental, then into an even smaller place farther away from town when the venue's remaining debts caught up to them. My parents insisted it was temporary. The same word they used when they first asked me for help. The same lie recycled, but now with no one left to believe it. Ryan moved back home after losing not just the Ferrari, but his online credibility. He had been known as the guy with the car for a brief moment. Without it, there was nothing left to display, nothing left to film. His creator era ended the same way it started, with borrowed shine that wasn't his to begin with. People online never forget public humiliation. His name became synonymous with entitlement. I didn't need to add anything to the story. They ruined themselves perfectly without me. Meanwhile, my life stabilized into something calm, beautiful, and entirely mine. I woke up without dread in my chest. I checked my bank account without bracing for damage. I took long runs along the river, cooked real meals, read books in the evenings instead of scrolling through work spreadsheets to figure out if I could afford repairs or groceries. Ethan and I developed something real, not the kind of relationship built on rescuing or fixing, but one built on respect and space and choice. He saw me, not the version of myself beaten down by obligation and guilt, but the version that had always existed beneath it. Ambitious, sharp, steady. Freedom didn't feel like revenge in the dramatic cinematic sense. It felt subtle, almost quiet. Warm lighting in my apartment, a new plant thriving on my windowsill. Weekend trips without guilt. Dinners where I ordered what I wanted instead of what I could justify. It felt like oxygen after years of thin air. But the revenge was still there. In every choice I made for myself, in every boundary I maintained, in every silence I kept. Revenge wasn't punishing them. Revenge was refusing to let them drain one more day of my life. A few relatives tried to intervene. They called it reconciliation, though it was never about healing. It was about restoring convenience. They insisted family should stick together. They insisted everyone makes mistakes. They insisted I should be the bigger person. But the people offering this advice were always the ones who had never sacrificed anything. The ones who believed suffering gives you moral obligation, not exhaustion. The ones who benefited from keeping the peace, not the ones who paid the price for it. I told them nothing. Not my side, not my reasons, not my numbers. I didn't need a jury. I didn't need validation. I didn't need to convert anyone to my perspective. The truth already existed in paperwork, in bank statements, in repossession records, in foreclosure notices. Anyone who wanted to see the truth could find it. Anyone who preferred the lie could keep it. Either way, I was done. One afternoon, months after everything settled, I drove past the old venue. I didn't plan to. It was just on the way to a hiking trail Ethan suggested. The gates were locked. The windows were dark. The sign had been taken down, leaving sun-bleached rectangles where the letters used to be. We slowed as we passed. I stared at the empty building, the place that started my financial spiral and ended my relationship with my family. It looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, even as if the moment the money stopped flowing, the building itself exhaled and collapsed inward. It didn't hurt to see it. It didn't trigger memories. It didn't open old wounds. It simply confirmed what I already knew. Nothing built on entitlement survives. People ask what closure looks like. They expect dramatic scenes, yelling, confrontations, apologies, big emotional moments. But closure rarely looks like a conversation. Closure is quiet. It's when you realize you no longer wait for their apology. You no longer rehearse what you would say if they called. You no longer feel the urge to justify your choices. You simply live without them. And the living feels light. I didn't get an apology. I didn't get accountability. I didn't get acknowledgement. What I got was something better, my life back, my time back, my voice back, and the certainty that if I hadn't walked away that night at 1 a.m. with a suitcase and a plan, I might still be trapped in a life where my needs came last. To this day, not one of them has apologized sincerely. And I've stopped waiting because some families don't break, they reveal. And once you see the truth, you don't unsee it. They lost the house, the car, the business, and the comfort I paid for. I lost nothing. I gained everything. And the truth is simple. I have never lived better than I do now.